Well, thank you for that wonderful New Hampshire Free State PorcFest welcome, where we're talking about Taste the Revolution. So it's a real privilege and honor to be with you, and if I have time for questions at the end of this, I will, but if I don't, if I run out of time, I won't. Some of these things become a little bit spontaneous if you get carried away in your own pee. So that sometimes happens. So here we are in 2025, and let me give you a scenario. I think stories. Let me get rid of this here. This is not a very big lip on the bottom of this thing. All right, now we got. So let's say that at the church where we go to, there's this elderly lady. Everybody calls her Aunt Penny. Aunt Penny, because everybody loves Aunt Penny, and she, like she's the quintessential grandmother. You know, everybody would love to have Aunt Penny as her grandmother. And she makes this ridiculously fantastic pot pie. She's an avid gardener. She's got chickens. I mean, she's got a grain mill in her kitchen, you know. I mean, Aunt Penny is the quintessential gardener, homemaker, everybody's favorite lady. Whenever there's a potluck, right? Her chicken pot pie is the first one that's gone. I mean, you got to be in like the first 15 people in the line, or Aunt Penny's chicken pot pie is gone. Well, next week we've got relatives coming, and I'm busy. We're all busy at our house. We got these, relatives coming, couple cousins, and we need to have some extra food. But we just don't have time. We're working. We got jobs. We got things to do, and I mean they're on vacation, but we're not on vacation, and we just don't have time to get this extra food together for them. So we need some extra food. So I go to Aunt Penny. I say, Aunt Penny, would you make about 3 or 4 of those pot pies, and we'll put them in the fridge, and we'll have this extra food for our relatives that are coming next week, because we just don't have time to fix the food. You know what? It's illegal for me to buy a pot pie from Aunt Penny. It's illegal. And that, folks, is why our nation right now needs a Food Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, all right. I get a little closer to the mic. Is that better?
Yeah.
How about?
Sorry, I'm pretty short when I said it. So.
Let me lift it up here just a little bit, so it'll be a little better. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Good? All right. So let me say it again. We need a Food Emancipation Proclamation. And I'm going to use some strong language because I think we live in a time where it's time to use some strong language. It's not time to hide behind a rock and be reluctant to speak truth into our system. We're on a bit of an awareness wave. Post-COVID, how many of you know people who were completely propagandized or whatever, and here they are now post-COVID, and the scales have come off, and they realize Fauci was lying to us. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because it's important now to understand, to ride this wave of I don't trust Fauci, to realize that Fauci's friends, people like Fauci, those kinds of people, that fraternity, is what is in charge of our food system at the USDA. I call it the USDA. And it's the same mentality, the same philosophy, the same everything as what we see at the USDA. And so we have an opening now, I think, just from a messaging standpoint in our culture, that when we can explain to people that Fauci or Fauci clones are in charge of our food system, we have a little in here, okay? That a lot of people who thought the USDA was protecting us and taking care of us and making sure we didn't get sick, that actually it's the same people as Fauci, and you know they're all from the same fraternity. So how did we get to where we can't buy Aunt Penny's chicken pot pie for our cousins? Aunt Penny, who maybe helped babysit our kids. Aunt Penny, who we've been in her house. We've gone to her garden. Maybe we even helped her butcher chickens, okay? But we can't buy her pot pie. How do we get to this place? Our food system is enslaved. Maybe some of us remember the words in Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie. Some of you have read that. And remember how they were all enamored of white store-boughten. It's the first place I ever saw the word boughten flour. Remember that? And it made this fluffy stuff, you know, and it wasn't the hard, gritty stuff. And so that was an indication of a culture that for some reason drank the Kool-Aid of an industrial food system, a love affair with boughten, with city stuff. We left our community canneries, our neighborhood abattoirs, our on-farm processing. And the industrial food system was glad to fill in to this gap. And we got this amazing industrial food system that gave us water pollution, all sorts of animal abuse, nutritional degradation, pathogen proliferation, E. coli, salmonella, and an entire lexicon today that those of us over 50 remember not even hearing when we were in grade school. Who ever heard the word E. coli, salmonella, listeria, pfisteria, avian influenza, celiac disease, gluten intolerance, type 2 diabetes? I mean, I didn't know anybody like that. And we grew up that way. And all these were food allergies. You know, if you wanted to have when I was a kid, if you wanted to have a birthday party for a 3-year-old, the moms didn't spend a week talking to each other about what they could serve. You just had a birthday party, invited your friends, people came to a birthday party, right? And what all of this lexicon is nature on its knees begging us, enough! Abuse, poison, disrespect, dishonor, violence. But we're not listening. We're still heading down that same pathway. But what this did was it created a very opaque system. Suddenly, the butcher, baker, and candlestick maker that were embedded in the village, in the city, suddenly moved out behind razor wire and security booths to make our food, and the food system went from transparency to opaqueness. Well, what happens in a society when a sector becomes opaque? What happens when a whole economic sector becomes unseeable? What happens is people become ignorant about that sector. The more opaque it is, the more ignorant we are about it, whether by design or by accident, doesn't matter. We become ignorant about it. And what happens when we become ignorant of things? We fear what we don't know. And when you fear what you don't know, you start asking for protection for your own ignorance. And so as a society, we began asking for somebody that was bigger than the industrial food system to ride herd, to look behind the razor wire, behind the guard towers, behind the sheep dip and the hazmat suits. You know, if you got to go through sheep dip and put on a hazmat suit to visit your food, you might not want to eat it. But society began looking for something that was bigger to look behind that fence and protect us from the boogeyman, because we didn't know about food. The Ralph Naderites. And so food safety came in the form of regulatory relief to stop these industrial abuses. And what we got then was extreme government involvement in our food system, really beginning in 1906 with Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. What's interesting about the 1906 Jungle, Upton Sinclair, documenting the abuses of the slaughterhouses in Chicago primarily, was that at that time in 1906, seven companies controlled 50% of America's meat supply. 7 companies controlled 50% of America's meat supply. And that was considered an oligarchy. Today, 4 companies control 85%, and that's considered free market. Well, what's happened in that century between 1906 and today is government intervention that accelerated. What happened within 6 months of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle being published, those 7 companies lost half of their sales. They were heading to bankruptcy. As people, it was the largest cultural exodus from the industrial food system to invert the trajectory that had been developing with Laura Ingalls Wilder and city-made bought in white sugar and white flour, and suddenly the culture revulsed at what Upton Sinclair presented to us in a voluntary free media mechanism and said, we're going to go back to our neighborhood butcher, our neighborhood abattoir, our neighborhood cannery. And it was a mass exodus away. And these 7 companies came crawling to President Rooseveltsky. I call him Rooseveltsky because he was a communist. And they came crawling to him and begged him, we're going to go bankrupt. We need a government stamp to give us credibility with the American consumer so we don't go bankrupt. Now, what if he had said, hey guys, you made your bed, now lie in it? What if he had had the gonads to do that? We would have a completely different food system today because the government would not have started, so Roosevelt gave them the Food Safety Inspection Service, FSIS, which came into law in 1908. All right? And so for the first time, suddenly, the government stepped into the marketplace and said, this is safe to eat, this is not safe to eat. And that created this entire mechanism that is now over a century old and has continued to grow like a cancer on our foodscape to where now I can't buy a pot pie from Aunt Penny for my relatives to come and for her to earn a little extra money in her kitchen on something that she loves to do. In 2020, Faith Popcorn, a futurist, wrote in her book, Clicking, she talked about the new trend of the vigilante consumer. The local food system, the small is good, all this developed as a result here recently. It follows the trend, it's been enabled by the democratization of information. So I want you to go back. When the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker were embedded in the village, everybody knew who the charlatans were. Because their kids played together, they were in each other's houses, they went to church together, they were in fraternities together, they knew each other. So the village voice created the vetting and the sleuthing and the credibility of the system. But what happened was, with the industrialization and the opaqueness of the system, that transparency left. And not until there was an internet did we return to a semblance of a village voice, a democratized vetting system, epitomized by the rise of Airbnb, Uber. Think about it. In 10 years, Airbnb created the same number of hospitality rooms globally as Marriott, Sheraton, and Hilton combined worldwide without driving a nail or cutting a board. That's a revolution. And how did it happen? Uber, same situation. How did it happen? Completely outside government control, government interest, no inspection, no nothing. I mean, if 10 years before Uber, somebody said, you know what? People all over the world are going to jump in a car that doesn't even have a taxi thing on top. The driver has not been vetted for special license or anything. The car hasn't been vetted that it's actually anything special. You're going to jump in this guy, you've never seen him, never know him, in a foreign country and say, take me someplace, and you're going to trust him? You say, what, are you nuts? No, I want the certified chauffeur. I want somebody, right, that's been in, had the business, got the card in there, and I can call him if I'm upset and that sort of thing. What made these things happen? It was a return of a global butcher, baker, candlestick maker voice embedded through real-time accountability and feedback loops that they use. If you're a bad passenger, you won't get a ride, and if you're a bad driver, you won't get a passenger. It's real-time rating. And so the Uberization of the chauffeur system and the Airbnb-ization of the hospitality movement are a signal of the liberty and the freedom that's created by reinserting real-time democratized accountability with a village voice via the internet. And so what was developed for globalism has become a mechanism for the revitalization of localism. And that's cool. I like that. When we take those global interests and they come to help us. And so, I think that it is time to Uberize the food system. So the biggest argument against food freedom is, well, what if somebody gets sick? You know, I was presenting at a General Assembly hearing in Virginia on a cottage food bill, and our Commissioner of Agriculture pulled me aside during a break. Nice guy. And he said, Joel, we can't give people freedom of choice for their food. If we did, we couldn't build hospitals fast enough for all the sick people that are getting bad food. As if all the people in hospitals today are all getting good food. I mean, the White House Maha report that was just released 2 weeks ago, if you've read it, it's an amazing thing. I don't know how far the document will get. I don't know where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be able to go with it, but the attack on the ultra-processed food system is quite profound. And for the U.S. to be of the 40, quote-unquote, rich nations of the world, if you look at our deficit, I'm not sure we're rich, but anyway, of the 40 supposedly rich nations of the world in health, the health metric, we're not number 1, we're not number 5, we're not number 10, we're not number 20, we are number 40. 40. Well, we invented McDonald's. We invented Crisco, margarine, DDT, genetically modified organisms. We invented a lot of stuff. And there's no reason that we are on the bottom of that heap. And so it begs the question when somebody says, well, what about bad food? It begs the question, well, what about the food Americans eat today? You know, most of it's toxic, pathogenic, denutritionized. There's nothing there. And so what I'm after, and I believe we have a real window of opportunity here. I'll just be straight up front with you guys. I've been blessed with being able to move in some higher circles than I've ever seen in my life. And I'm after a 30-minute pitch interview with Trump to pitch him the idea of a Food Emancipation Proclamation. Now, I'm not here to defend Trump. I'm not a great, this is not a partisan thing. But I think that this is with the power of what Maha is doing and Trump's bullishness, I think there's actually an opportunity here. And here are some of my sound bites that I've been working on. Let me just try them here, see if they work. Okay? Sound bites, all right? Look, we're not abolitionists here. We're not trying to abolish Monsanto. We're not trying to abolish Ciba Geigy or Tyson. What we're asking for is a functional underground railroad out of the system. How's that for a sound bite? Okay? Here's another one. What could possibly be wrong with two consenting adults exercising voluntary freedom of choice to create agency for their microbiome's fuel? I mean, if I can't control what I feed my microbiome, where's my agency? I mean, what good is it to have the freedom to carry guns and socialize and preach and assemble if I can't choose my body's fuel to give me the energy to go pray, preach, and assemble? And when we start talking about benefits, my goodness, right now we've got AOC and Bernie, our dear New England friend Bernie, running around the thing saying, we got to stop the oligarchy. We got to stop the oligarchy, right? Well, their vision of stopping the oligarchy is another federal agency bigger than the oligarchy. Well, how's that worked? As Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? What we've got is, again, I think many Americans are aware now of as RFK Jr. talks about, agency capture, the revolving door, okay? We know that. And so many people are realizing the answer isn't top down. The answer to stopping the oligarchy is releasing the entrepreneurial spirit from America's heartland and letting individual farmers access their neighbors with food. We're talking about hollowing out, rural America, transferring rural wealth to the cities, which we've been doing now for decades and decades and decades. We now talk about flyover country. And trust me, the blue-red divide in our country is very clearly an urban-rural divide. You can see it just as plain as anything. Well, it's because when you live in a great big city, all you're surrounded with every day is what people do. Roads, trees, cars, stoplights, all. When you live in the country, you're surrounded every day by what God did. And that creates a very different mental mystique, a very different awareness of life and decision making. And so the first thing that would happen with a Food Emancipation Proclamation, so the idea is that if you and I want to engage in a food transaction, we should be able to do so without a federal agent being between us. One of the reasons that you can't find a slaughterhouse today is because of government intervention in food regulatory laws that have been extremely scale prejudicial. This is the problem with almost all regulations. They are scale prejudicial. And I believe that it's inherently unfair for any regulation that is scale prejudicial. In other words, easier to comply if you're big than if you're small. That is inherently unjust and unfair. Well, somebody says, well, give me an example of a regulation that is not scale prejudicial. Okay, speed limits. Doesn't cost any more money to put your foot on the gas pedal or a brake of an 18-wheeler than a Prius. Okay? That's a scale, that's not a scale prejudicial regulation. So I'm not an anarchist, and I'm not against anything. People aren't always trustworthy, okay? But But there needs to be a place, there needs to be an off-ramp for people who want to opt out. The main difference between a tyranny and a free society is how it views its minority. So when Governor Tim Kaine was governor of Virginia, he's now senator from Virginia, he came for a visit. He and his 6 no-neck wire earbud guys put him on a hay wagon. We took him around the farm. And it was a great tour. And he was totally taken with non-chemical agriculture, the abundance he saw, the happy animals he saw, the earthworms. He's a true environmentalist, and he totally got the thing. So we got done, and he looks at me and he said, "So, what can I do for you?" Well, first I said, "Well, as you've seen, we're actually healing hardwood forests with pigs, running pigs through them to create disturbance with animals instead of fire. And so how about next week we have a meeting down at in Richmond, and we'll work out. Polyface will lease all the state parks, and we'll run pigs through them to keep the trees healthy." And of course, he and I both knew I was exactly correct, but can you imagine the environmentalists and everybody else that go nuts over that? I said, no, Governor. I said, your responsibility is the same responsibility of every other elected official, and that is to be a veil of protection between the global corporate interests and the innovators, the prototypers at the other end of that spectrum, to protect the minority view, to protect a minority interest. You see, the way innovation happens with prototypes. You don't plant an oak tree with a 50-foot oak tree. You plant it with an acorn, the smallest viable life form of that tree. So anybody that's been in business, you know you need proof of concept, you need prototype. You don't start a business, with a great big jump off the cliff deal. You start with an idea and you develop it. And so one of the problems that this food regulatory scale prejudicial environment has created is it's made it very, very difficult for small people to get in. And it becomes a concessionary protectionism for the people who are already in, who already have their position established in the marketplace. But the answers to the food system are not coming from the big people. They're coming from the little people like they always have. The answers always come from the lunatic fringe. And the lunatic fringe is what they don't want to see. For example, right now, all the big producers, all the big slaughterhouses, I'm in livestock, all the big slaughterhouses, a chicken is dredged through as many as 40 chlorine baths. Okay, because they come in so manure-y and filthy, and the heavy gauntlet defeatherers, which are not what we use, have to pound them extra hard because they're on shackles. They're not in a little a rotary picker like they used to use. So all the fecal particulate is pounded into the skin, into the structure, and so they have to soak them in chlorine. All right, I'm hoping I'm making you hungry for chicken. But those of us that are running them on pasture, they don't come in with a quarter pound of dirt embedded, manure embedded in their feathers. They come in clean. And number two, there are wonderful, completely non-toxic, non-chlorinated antimicrobials now. Hypochlorous is one. There are others that small operators are using that are extremely viable in a completely different system. So we don't need 40 chlorine baths, but that's what the industry says we need in order to protect food safety. So they try to write the regulations to require these kinds of things. And next thing you know, the small producers, their customers don't want it. Their philosophically they don't want it, and so you're pushed into these corners that you don't want to be in. Innovation requires embryos, embryonic prototypes. And the problem is, if in order to launch a slaughterhouse, for example, just to give an example, if you need $3 million just to get a T-bone steak to your neighbor, what happens is that the dreams that are babies in the minds of thousands of entrepreneurs, the dreams are stillborn because the embryo has to be too big to be birthed. That's the problem. Food safety is a smokescreen. These regulations are not about safety. Let me tell you why. Right now, let's take methamphetamine, prescription drugs, fentanyl. Okay, I don't want to get into a discussion about drugs. I'm a free drugger. We shouldn't even have any drug requirements whatsoever. You should. By the same token, we shouldn't have any health care whatsoever. These things are intricately linked. See, the problem is that once the government injected itself into our health care, suddenly we didn't have agency over our own bodily autonomy anymore. Because suddenly your decision on what to eat became a risk factor for the social health umbrella. As long as the government wasn't involved in health care, if you want to go blow your brains out, tank fentanyl, whatever, jump off a cliff, fine with me. It just rids the world of, cull the genetics out of the gene pool. That's fine. Okay? But as soon as the government got involved in health care, then suddenly it created an external economic not benefit, but incentive or cost, okay, to your individual decision. And so the Food Emancipation Proclamation is fundamentally linked to a discussion about health care, because many people think drinking raw milk, eating Aunt Penny's pot pie, her being able to, not eating it, but her being able to sell it. See, that's the next part of this. See, you can give it away, you can buy it, you can feed it to your kids, you just can't sell it. All other hazardous substances, the prohibition is on buyer, seller, use, and gift. Okay? But in food, it's only on one, the seller. You can use it, you can buy it, you can gift it. Clearly, it's not about food safety. It's about market access. So the entire food safety paradigm in our country is a complete smokescreen about the reality. Right now, the mentality is very similar. Some of you are old enough to remember 30 years ago when we started homeschooling our kids. You drew the lines, you didn't ask, you didn't tell, you didn't do anything, because the government would send a state truant officer, and they would come and take your child out of your home and put them in foster care for you participating in something as socially negligent and unacceptable as homeschooling. Fortunately, we're not there anymore. Our society has moved way past that, okay? But at that time, if you remember the newspapers, every week there's a new op-ed piece by some elitist academic saying, if we allow this aberrant schooling to continue, we're not going to be able to build enough psych wards to handle all these unsocialized children. Some of you may remember that. It's very similar to my guy in Virginia who says we can't build enough hospitals to take care of all the sick people. This is the paradigm. Okay? And so safety actually is a very subjective thing. I think it's actually pretty unsafe to send your kids to public school. I think it's unsafe to eat Lunchables, Hot Pockets, squeezable Velveeta cheese, Coca-Cola. Okay? Safety is a highly subjective thing. Think about this. You can go out on a 70-degree day, gut shoot a deer during hunting season, put it on the hood of your Bronco, parade it around town, your trophy, in the afternoon setting sun, string it up in the backyard, and cut it out the next week when you're back off of work, and feed it to your kids, and have a community dinner, and feed it to all the neighbors' kids, and you're a great American. But if you wait for an appropriate temperature day, butcher a pig on a right temperature day, scrub down all the tables, handle it all, you can't sell one pork chop for a neighbor or they'll put you in jail. See, the whole thing is out of whack. We grant exemptions for all sorts of things. In Virginia, we have a farm vehicle exemption. If you stay within 40 miles of home and you're working and you're driving on farm business, you can have a farm use tag on your vehicle, and you don't have to get it licensed. Because farmers don't go often, they don't grow far, and they don't go fast. Interestingly, in 1969, when that, just to show you the apple didn't fall from the tree in my family, when that law went into effect, Dad tried to organize farmers in Virginia to all rent each other 1 square foot of land for $0.01 a year. So farmers could drive the entire state. Now, I'm checking on my land over here. Daycare. I don't know about New Hampshire, but in Virginia, you can keep 3 kids in your home in a daycare business without a license. Why? Because the state understands if you're only keeping 3 in your house, chances are there's much more of a relational understanding and arrangement with your client than if it's a 50-kid daycare center in the middle of town. Okay? That's an appropriate exemption. In elder care in Virginia, you can keep 3 in your home and have an elder care business. Again, same deal. If you're only keeping 3 in your home, you're dealing with 3 individuals with their elder care, and there's probably a relationship, a knowledge. They're in and out. They see your house. They see what's going on. And there's it's the butcher, baker, and candlestick maker, you see, embedded. And so these exemptions for other things are absolutely, I'm not saying a Food Emancipation Proclamation so I can put food in Walmart, even if they wanted it, or Costco. I'm saying if you want to come to my farm as a voluntary consenting adult, ask around, look around, and you want to engage in a food transaction with me, we should be able to do it without a government official. So, if we did this, we would have, undoubtedly, because I travel the world, I travel the country, and I meet thousands of farmers who are desperate to sell homemade bologna to the neighborhood, make some ice cream, sell some raw milk, some cheese, butcher a hog and make some sausage, that are ready to do this, but the prejudicial regulations keep them from accessing. And so we have 2020, we have empty store shelves. Does anybody think that we would have had less of a hiccup in our food system in the spring of 2020 when all the shelves went down if we, instead of supplying our nation from 5,000 mega processing canneries, slaughterhouses, facilities, through the funnel, that was the funnel that our food system came in, these 5,000 mega facilities, if instead our nation had been supplied by 500,000 neighborhood, community-based, scaled canneries and abattoirs and places, would we have had as big a hiccup? Of course we wouldn't. And not only that, but when you're small, it's easier to be clean. It's a lot easier to keep your kitchen clean when you're making 10 meals a day versus 5,000. Okay? And when you're, think about these big Tyson, IBP, JBS, processing, think about this. In one location, 5,000 beef a day. 5,000 beef a day. You can put about 50 on a tractor trailer. Well, that's 100 tractor trailers. You know how much blood that is? You know how many guts that is? You know how much, all right, let's go to chickens. Let's go to, it's just, at our place, we butcher chickens 2 days a week, 4 hours in the morning, clean up. And guess what? We go do other things. We make hay, we build fence, we move some pigs or whatever the rest of the time. People aren't getting carpal tunnel syndrome and all the other things that come with the large-scale slaughterhouses that even the animal welfare regulations don't even talk about. So there would be a rural economic revival. There would be farmland preservation by being able to bring dollars to the farm. How many of you have heard farmers complain about, well, the middleman makes all the money? See, the retail dollar is divided into basically 4 components: production, processing, marketing, and distribution. There's 4 legs on that stool. Let's assume for a moment that it's a quarter apiece. 25 cents to the producer, 25% to the processor, 25% marketer, 25 cents distribution. All right? As late as 1945, the average farmer was getting almost 50% of that retail dollar. Today, that farmer average is getting 9% of the retail dollar. That means we can have a new government policy that says from now on, we're not going to pay farmers anything. They just all have to work for nothing. It would only change the price of food 9%. And so one of the reasons we see the hemorrhage in rural America and farmers having problems and farmland being bought up by the Chinese and BlackRock and Vanguard and all these companies is because farming has become unviable due to the inability of farmers to access being the middleman to get the retail dollar. And never has distribution been cheaper. We now ship nationwide. If you'd have told me 20 years ago we'd be shipping eggs to Baltimore, I'd have said, you're nuts. We could never ship eggs to Baltimore. Today, because of defund the police and the blue city high taxes, high regulations, we can now ship eggs from Virginia, from our farm, to any large city in America cheaper than they can buy them at their local farmer's market. Because our taxes are low, our crime is low, our regulations are low, all that's low. So here we are in a little backwater area, and suddenly we can access, because UPS distribution, the logistics, the computerization of logistics and the streamlining of logistics has fundamentally and completely changed the distribution capacity. When we started shipping July 4th, 2019, until then we were cultist localists. But somebody moved our cheese. We began losing customers. Why should I come out on a dirt road and get dinged on my car in a pothole in your dirt road when I can sit in my jammies in the bed and order from Butcher Box and have it delivered to my front door? It's okay to be nostalgic until you're obsolete. So we got pushed into somebody changed our cheese. So we started this. When we started, we're shipping frozen meat, dry ice. You get the dry ice in a big, insulated thing, and you take a scoop and you kind of scoop the beads in. You're kind of watching the weather report and where is this, how long. It's a lot of kind of seat of the pants flying. Well, in just the 4 or 5 years that we've been shipping, UPS has now added a new platform for shipping perishables, because there's so many people starting to do this now, where we put the box on a scale. It's linked to the UPS headquarters, whatever, and it automatically searches the weather report, it searches the zip code, it uses the weight, and it spits out, and now the dry ice, instead of coming in pellets, it comes in like little Hershey bars, with little 1 ounce cookies that you break off, okay? And it spits out 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, and you break off the right amount and you put it in the box. There's no thinking, no nothing. It all makes all that decision for you. That's the kind of rapid change we're seeing in logistics in the whole thing. So if you want to know your farmer, know your food, okay, how does that farmer get access to you if you start putting a bunch of Tyson scale industrial impediments between that transaction? Then the average rural farmer is still inhibited from being able to access relationally marketed customers, are you with me, with food. So such a policy would bring a lot of dollars back to the farm. It would also stimulate young entrepreneurial farmers. Young entrepreneurial farmers would proliferate. Why do young people not want to? Why do young people not want to get into farming? Well, they don't see the money in it. Okay, but if you can suddenly become the middleman, and wear all those middleman hats, then suddenly there's a real opportunity there. It would create safer food, because relationally direct marketed people, we don't have a bank of Philadelphia attorneys behind us to protect us from upset customers. We're vulnerable. What if they get a bad steak? Then you get a bad rating, you suddenly lose customers. So the small direct marketed, direct branded thing is much more insurance than checking boxes at a USDA bureaucracy somewhere. And what happens every time there's a recall? You ever notice this? Every time there's a recall, the CEO of the company has his press conference. What's the first thing he says? We have complied with all government requirements. So the whole food safety program is a skirt for the food industry to get up under behind and hide under to protect them from litigation and onslaughts. And basically, if you've complied, if you've checked all your boxes, then you're not liable for anything. And so because small outfits like us don't hide behind those skirts, our desire and necessity and incentive to actually be safer is a lot higher. Next, it would create responsible consumers. How do you create consumers, buyers, who are not ignorant? The only way that you create non-ignorant decision makers is by making them responsible for their decision. So as long as it has the USDA blue buzz on it, I don't have to think about it. Oh, government made all that decision. And so we have dumbed down our food eating culture by somebody else making all those decisions and saying, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And so now we have 75% of our consumption is ultra-processed food, which by definition you can't make in your kitchen, and you can't even read the label, and it's basically chemicals and toxicity and pathogenicity and red dye 20 and all these things. I think here's how out of the box I am. We're getting ready to have this battle between what additives should we allow and what additives should we not, and what should we put on? Is glyphosate okay? And blah 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 blah. Well, I was in California doing a talks to a school system out there. They had a middle school system. They had a 3-acre farm hooked up to the school system. All the middle schoolers had to spend half a day a week out at this farm. And these two ladies running the farm had a worm box. It was about 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep worm box. And let me tell you, you want to get 10, 11, 12-year-old kids fired up about stuff, you let them put their hands in a worm box. It's just so visceral and it's amazing. Worms, it's just amazing. All right. So anyway, here's homework. All right, kids, next Monday, bring food. So next Monday, the kids brought, gummy bears, Twizzlers, Kit Kats, Lunchables, squeezable Velveeta cheese, whatever, right? They put them in the worm box over here. The two farm ladies, they brought in a pork chop, an apple, a banana, all right? They put it in over here. Next week, they gave it a week. Kids go charging up the hill. They open the box. Out comes the Twizzlers, the gummy bears, the Kit Kat, all this. Over here, they look. It's gone. There's nothing there. The obvious question was, well, why would you want to eat something worms won't even eat? So here's my simple proposition for RFK Jr. before they get all embroiled in a big agency trying to research this additive and that additive, this and that. All we need is a worm farm. And we have 100 worm beds, and we take everything we put on the soil, in our food, on our plants. We just make a list of them, all the stuff, and you do a 1-week trial. What are the worms like? What do they don't like? And every week you can sample 100 of these. In a year, you got 5,000. In 2 years, 10,000. Okay? All the stuff. And you just let the worms vote. If they like it, you use it. If they don't like it, you don't use it. You throw it out. And the worms don't vote, they're not influenced by, K Street. I mean, the reason we have a K Street is because all our freedoms are for sale. If our freedoms weren't for sale, we wouldn't have a K Street. So we'd have more responsible consumers because they would know about their food. We'd have competition to the industrial food system, shutting down the oligarchy. We'd have better food at lower prices. And we'd have food security through bioregionalism. There are a ton of benefits that would happen that these are viable, real, serious, not funny benefits if we had a Food Emancipation Proclamation. And I can't imagine anything more Trumpian than him coming up saying, we're going to have a Food Emancipation Proclamation, take the shackles and enslavements off our food system and allow entrepreneurial access to shut down the oligarchy. I mean, that is a message, I think, that we have a window of opportunity that would resonate with lots and lots and lots of Americans. So, thank you for letting me share that vision with you. And I hope that together we can actually, instead of just talking about the problems in our food system and talking about the industrialization and the sicknesses and the healths and all those things of our food systems, that we could actually do one thing that wouldn't cost one dime. It wouldn't create another agency. It wouldn't create a bureaucrat. It would fight our problems with freedom. And that's what we're after. Thank you so much.